center of our Conservative Party, ladies and gentlemen. Good to see you too. Thanks. We're here in Ottawa South. This is actually my home riding. I grew up here in Ottawa before I moved to Saskatchewan. And my mom, Mary Shearer, was on the board of the Ottawa South AGM and devoted a lot of her time to the riding here. And I know there's tremendous volunteers all throughout the Ottawa area. And I know many people in Ottawa are excited about Pierre's candidacy because they know that Pierre can win in Ottawa, ladies and gentlemen. Pierre has run an Ottawa area riding since 2004. That is a track record of success, and that is the type of success he's going to bring to the National Party. Some people said that as a former leader, I shouldn't get involved in this election, in this leadership race. And I thought about that. I thought about that for a few seconds until I heard that Pierre was going to run for the leadership. And I decided because there's so much at stake, not just for our party, ladies and gentlemen, but for our country as well. Our country's in a difficult position. And when you look back at the course of human history, there's always times when countries face these types of challenges. And we always look to someone who is going to rise up and lead us out of this difficulty, lead us back to achieve our full potential like we know we should. And that's the most frustrating part about living under Justin Trudeau in Canada. And it's the most exciting part thinking about how Pierre is going to lead our party to victory. There's a reason why thousands and thousands of people are coming out to see him everywhere he goes. It's because he's saying things that nobody else will say. He's speaking truth to power. He's not going to listen to our enemies in the left, and the Liberals, the NDP, and the media who are going to prescribe us and stop being who we are, stop fighting for what we believe in. Pierre's going to fight for what we believe in. Favorite side of the night so far. Absolutely. So I'm going to tell you something, a couple things about Pierre. Pierre is a man of integrity. He's a dedicated person who loves his country, who loves freedom and individual liberty. And he is working so incredibly hard to renew our party, to give our party something to be excited about again. He's traveling all across the country. He's spending nights in hotels away from his family. And a lot of people come up to me and they say, how can I help? How can I help? It's very simple. Buy a membership in the Conservative Party of Canada so that you can vote for Pierre. So everyone here this evening, everyone here who has come out to hear what Pierre has to say, if you don't hold a membership in the party, but you want to see Pierre become Prime Minister, please, tonight, go buy a membership so that you can vote in our leadership race. That is the most important thing that you can do for Pierre. Are you all going to do that tonight, ladies and gentlemen? Absolutely. Now, I could go on and on about Pierre. I've known him for quite a long time. We were both elected in 2004 together. We both showed up on Parliament Hill in suits that probably looked like we wore them from our dads. And we've worked together ever since. And the thing that I like most about Pierre is he is a man of integrity. He says the same things in English as he says in French. He says the same things in Eastern Canada as he says in Western Canada. And most importantly, and I know leadership elections are about a lot of things. They're about a lot of things. One of the most important things they are about trust. You want to be able to trust the leader who's asking for your vote. And I'm here to tell you, Pierre is the type of man who will do the same things after the leadership race as he promised he would do during the leadership race. I am so excited to be endorsing Pierre, but there's somebody who can tell you a little bit more about him, who knows him a little bit more, well, hopefully a lot more than I do. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to call out Anna
to tell you a little bit about myself. My family immigrated here in 1995. They came from Venezuela and became as political refugees. We had to fight for everything. My father was a manager at a bank, and he came here, jumped in the back of a pickup truck, and picked up strawberries and vegetables. He went from wearing a business suit to wearing second-hand clothes and just pick up strawberries, because that's what you had to do to feed your family. We lived paycheck to paycheck. Putting fuel in our car is not a luxury. It's how you get to work. It's how you drive your kids to school for an education. My husband's story is a little bit different, but the same. He was born from an unwed teenager mother who gave Pierre up to adoption to two wonderful school teachers. They had a little bit of the same upbringing, living paycheck to paycheck, understanding that putting fuel in your car is not a luxury. So here we are, years later, fighting that, understanding that it's not a luxury, understanding what it is to be having to fight for your family every day. So ladies and gentlemen, I've heard Andrew say that my husband says the same thing in French, in English, in West, in East. I can attest to that. And I will go even further and say that my husband says the same thing privately than publicly. He means what he says. And I'm not going to lie to you. It is not easy. It is a sacrifice that we're doing as a family. We brought our kids here earlier, thinking that we could have them with us. Well, that didn't work out so well, let me tell you. They're back home and in bed. So unfortunately, I wanted to introduce them to you. But you're going to get the head of the family, our fighter, my husband, Pierre Poilievre.
Wow! Thank you, Ottawa! And more importantly, thank you to my amazing wife, Anaïda Poilievre Galindo. Everybody give it up for her! Le seul problème, à chaque fois qu'elle parle devant des foules comme ça, les gens veulent que ce soit elle qui se présente pour Première ministre. The only problem is when she speaks before me is that people want her to run for Prime Minister instead. Pretty impressive speaker, isn't she? Welcome back. I've got a lot more to say about her. But before I do, I just want to give Andrew Scheer a hard time for a minute. Andrew has been a friend of mine for about a quarter century. He was extremely successful as leader of our party, got more votes than at any time in our party's history. He's a man of grace and integrity, and he's right, we were elected on the same day, although I was elected 2 hours earlier than him. That changed. And Andrew is a much older man than I am. He was born on May 20th, 1979. I'm on June 3rd, 1979. And we walked up from the Eternal Flame up to the Peace Tower that first day. We were elected, and I looked up at the Peace Tower and I said, Andrew, I can't believe that I'm here. He said, I agree, I can't believe you're here either. Andrew, when he he was a relentless campaigner. And he started off with the seniors. Of course, he was a young guy, 24 years old, and he wasn't sure if he could win over older people. So he went straight to the seniors' home. He walked right up to a lady and he said, "Do you know who I am?" And she said, "No, but if you ask the nurse, she'll tell you who you are." Anyway, it's good to be humble in this business, isn't it? Remember the people and the boss. And we're the servants, you are the masters. And it is great to be among you today. We had a little rally earlier in the holding room with our kids. They started to get very excitable after a few chocolate cookies. Too excitable to be out on stage today, but they intend to make some cameo appearances. But we are so blessed to have my wife here with you and us all here today. You know, she told the story of her incredible father who came here with practically nothing. That they lived in a small apartment in Montreal, a big family in a small apartment. And they've all built an incredibly successful life. Her father now is part owner of a pharmacy. Her one brother is a soldier. Her sister is a nurse. And her other brother is a carpenter. And she is, yes. That is the great immigrant story of this country, right? And it has always been the same story. Whether you've been here for 300 days, or your family has been here for 300 years. All of us came here at one point, or so did our ancestors, to carve out a little piece of paradise out of this big, cold patch of land called Canada. We didn't come for free stuff, we came for freedom, right? Yeah. To a small French village qui s'appelle Léoville. La raison pour laquelle il y est allé, c'était encore pour travailler fort, pour bâtir une vie, et parce que le gouvernement Laurier a dit en Europe que c'était une opportunité de recommencer la vie et de reprendre le contrôle de leur vie ici au Canada. He wanted to do the same thing here that today's immigrants come, and that's to build a life. And Laurier was asked at the time, what is Canada's nationality? Now, of course, in most European countries, you'd answer by ethnicity, right? France, French, Scotland, Scottish, England, English, etc. But that kind of answer was already impossible here in Canada because we were so mixed up already, right? There were, of course, the first people, the French, the English, the Protestants, Catholics, Scots, Irish, etc. So you couldn't answer based on ethnicity. So Laurier said this: Canada is free, and freedom is its nationality. Whether it is the teenage girl who's fallen deep into depression after 2 years of being cut off from sporting and social activities, the small businessman who put his life savings and mortgaged his house only to be locked down again and again and again, or the hard-working and law-abiding people who delivered the goods and services across the borders without vaccines for 2 years and were called heroes. Because of a personal medical decision. These heroes who are the least likely people to transmit a virus. After all, they are all alone in a truck all day long. We should support our truckers and stand up for their freedoms and their who got a phone call that her mother was suddenly on her deathbed in Ontario. But she couldn't get on a plane to fly and see her, and so she had to drive through the freezing rain because of a personal medical decision required because of her own medical history, and risked her life to make it just in time to say goodbye. Ladies and gentlemen, this is no longer about medical science. Justin Trudeau's actions on this have been nothing but political science.
He's a tyrant!
And that is why I strongly support the efforts of the Conservative Party to put a full and complete end to the vaccine mandate. But you know, it's not just COVID. People feel like they're losing control of their economic lives as well. Government gatekeepers block our First Nations from developing their resources and providing paychecks for their people and self-reliance for their communities. Gatekeepers block our immigrants from working in the very professions and trades for which they are trained, all while millions of Canadians go without family doctors. Doctors that have been banned effectively by bureaucracy from doing their jobs. Or there is the single mother who trembles as she walks down the grocery aisle because food prices are rising so fast that she's now part of the 4 out of 5 families that has had to cut the quality or quantity of their diet just to afford food. Or the working guy who can't go fishing or hunting on the weekend because he can't afford the $1.80 a liter gas. Or the 32-year-old man who's living in his mother's basement because he can't afford the $868,000 it now costs for a typical house after the federal government printed money to inflate the price and the local bureaucracies prevented builders from building homes. And somebody has even called it Justinflation. Exactly this moment, when we have 30-year highs in inflation and record-smashing gas prices, to hit Canadians another time with another tax increase. In mere hours, the clock will run out and Trudeau's tax hike will take effect at our gas pumps, on your heat, and indirectly on the food you eat and on the essentials of your life. As if we don't have enough problems already, he decides he wants to raise the cost even further. Now let's be clear. Higher gas prices are not a byproduct or an indirect consequence of the carbon tax. They are the purpose, the stated purpose of the carbon tax. That is the design and the purpose, the raison d'etre, as we say in French, of the tax, right? Now, I have been very clear in my position on this, and here we are in a leadership race. And leadership races are about choices. Now, some of the other candidates, whom I respect, have made other choices. Both Mr. Brown, Patrick Brown, and John Charest. Nice guys. They dedicated their lives to politics. They worked very hard, but I just respectfully disagree. Patrick Brown, after saying he was against the carbon tax running for the provincial Ontario leadership, suddenly announced that he was in favor of it. Not only in favor of any old carbon tax, but specifically in favor of Ontario adopting the federal backstop carbon tax that Trudeau imposed and that will raise the tax to $50 a ton tonight. In other words, in his very platform, he not only endorsed the carbon tax, but he endorsed tonight's carbon tax increase. As for Mr. Charest, he brought in Quebec's carbon tax. Now, not everyone was against it. Stéphane Guilbeault was a strong supporter of Jean Charest's carbon tax. And he then piled on a fuel tax and then raised the sales tax in Quebec on top of all of that. He's a nice guy. But Jean Charest has never met a tax he wouldn't hike. That's the reality. So let's judge the carbon tax based on the merits of the proposal. Let's consider what the Liberals said the carbon tax would do. One, they said it would cut greenhouse gas emissions. Has it done that?
Bullshit!
Look at the facts. In 2016, Canada was emitting 707 million tons of greenhouse gases. That's in 2016. In 2019, the most recent year on record, that number has risen to 730 million tons, an increase of 23 million tons of extra greenhouse gases have come into effect since Justin Trudeau's policies began. Not only that, they probably drove up emissions around the world. Let me give you an example. Has anybody heard of Suntec tomatoes? The little miracles of Manitoba, right? Well, the Liberal carbon tax applied not just to the normal things you'd expect, but also to the CO2 they were releasing into their greenhouse. CO2 that was consumed by the plant life inside that greenhouse. I guess Justin Trudeau missed that day in science class, right? And so what was the consequence? It was more expensive to buy a Manotick tomato in Manotick than a Mexican tomato in Manotick. So a policy drives consumers to the price signal to buy a tomato that had to be transported by truck and train straight across the entire continent, driving money out of our country and pollution into the atmosphere with a carbon tax that is supposed to save the world. Does any of that make sense to any of you?
Absolutely not!
The second thing they said was that the carbon tax would never go above $50 a ton. Remember? They said it's capped, we promise this is all you're going to pay. Well, that was before the election. And then after the election, they said that the carbon tax would actually be rising up to $170 a ton. So in other words, the worst is still ahead of us. And finally, they said you would profit from paying this tax, right? Ever get one of those emails where they say you just have to send over your banking information with a $10 payment and an uncle in a faraway land will deposit $1 million in your bank account? You know, I think Justin Trudeau might have been involved in writing those kinds of emails. That's how he actually came up with this carbon tax scheme. So just last week, the parliamentary budget officer said that no, in fact, more than half of Canadians pay far more in taxes than they get back in rebates. You're paying more, the government is getting more, all of us are worse off, and that is why I am announcing today that a government led by Prime Minister Poilievre will axe the carbon tax. Cities and companies from pouring raw sewage into our fresh water, aren't we? Two, we're going to go with technology instead of taxes. Instead of forcing our provinces to impose a tax on their citizens, we're going to incentivize them to enable more environmentally friendly technology like carbon capture and storage, or shifting to nuclear power, or instead of exporting our jobs and our money to the world, we're going to export our clean, green energy to the world, aren't we? We will eliminate Bill C-69 so that we can begin to produce the 1,300 trillion cubic feet of natural gas that we have right under our feet, and we're going to export it. We're going to export it to the world so that foreign countries can shut down their coal-fired plants and replace it with clean, green, Canadian natural gas. We have an incredible advantage of this. And British Columbia is the closest place in North America to Asia, much closer than the Gulf Coast, so we have a shorter shipping distance. Newfoundland is the closest point in North America to Europe. Again, another shipping distance advantage. Furthermore, how do you turn natural gas into a liquid so that it can fit on a ship and be transported abroad? Anybody have any ideas? Anybody from science? You gotta cool it down, right? That's how you turn a gas into liquid. We have an advantage there too, because we have a lot of cold weather in Canada. It's our most abundant natural resource, right? In fact, it was so cold when Andrew and I were in Saskatchewan, there were actually Liberals with hands in their own pockets. So Newfoundland, they have this incredible project. They're going to pipe the natural gas from the Jeanne d'Arc offshore oil field right up to the shore, put it on a vessel, cool it down to minus 161 degrees Celsius, put it on a ship, send it off to Europe to break European dependence on Putin's energy, right? And we're going to clear the way so we can actually dig mines and produce lithium so that those electric cars that we all want to feel good about driving actually have ethically produced, environmentally sound lithium mined, refined, and manufactured here in Canada. And the next thing we're going to do, we're going to Poilievre government, we'll ban the importation of overseas oil. I haven't ever seen him attend a protest at the St. John coast where we watched tanker after tanker of oil from Saudi Arabia, Nigeria, and other more polluting jurisdictions transited right across the sea and to our borders, while at the same time he blocks the construction of Canadian pipelines. When I'm Prime Minister, we're going to remove the regulatory gatekeepers to build Canadian pipelines with Canadian steel. The math on this is so simple. Okay, so in New Brunswick, they're bringing in about 130,000 barrels of overseas oil every day in Canada. That's almost 1 million barrels a week. Newfoundland, right nearby, is proposing to expand its production by 400,000 barrels a day. In other words, if we could get the regulatory gatekeepers out of the way, the Newfoundlanders could produce enough oil to supply the New Brunswick refineries and then have 200,000 extra barrels left over to ship off overseas to break the foreign dependence on dictators, to replace dollars for dictators with paychecks for our people. You like that idea?
We love you, Pierre.
You like that? Good. Well, you know, in fairness, it's not just the carbon tax that's causing all of this inflation, is it? There's a few other factors at play. For example, the government printed $400 billion out of thin air, right? Creating new cash. They suddenly realized that when you create more cash without creating more what cash buys, you get higher prices. If you have a country with 10 loaves of bread and $10, it's $1 a loaf, right? But if you double the number of dollars and keep the same number of loaves, you double the price. It becomes $2. That's exactly what happens. But the prices don't affect everyone equally. If you're a mega rich mansion owner, well, you've gotten a lot richer because your mansion has gone up in value. Your stocks have inflated. All of the assets of the super rich have inflated as the government pumps more and more money into the financial system. Meanwhile, the wages of the working class people are diminished again and again. Think of this. We have 5.7% inflation. If that were to repeat itself for just 5 years, you would lose almost a third of your paycheck's purchasing power. If your boss were to walk up to you and say he was cutting your paycheck by a third, you'd say, take this job and shut it. But when Justin Trudeau does it to you, he expects you to just shut up and payout. And that is exactly what they have done. My government is going to take exactly the opposite direction. We are going to reassert the Bank of Canada's traditional mandate, which is to keep inflation low and protect the purchasing power of our money. And we're going to cut wasteful spending. We're going to cut wasteful spending so that we no longer need to print money. We will cancel the Liberals' $100 billion slush fund so that we don't need to print that money. We're going to get rid of the wasteful infrastructure bank. Get rid of this infrastructure bank. We need infrastructure in this country, but we do not need another bank. What is this bank for? It's for bonuses for the rich and backstops for corporations that go over budget. The reality is this: if construction companies cannot keep their budgets, they should pay for the losses. Taxpayers should not. I'm getting rid of the multi-billion-dollar infrastructure bank. Oh, we just found another $1 billion. We're going to defund the CBC. The room doesn't seem undecided on that one, does it? That would save us a lot of money, wouldn't it? And while we're at it, we're going to trust our people again to make their own decisions about what they think, right? You know, the government's now got this new bill, C-11, which will allow the CRTC to regulate what you see and say online.
It's bullshit!
Saying anything that the government deems to be harmful. Now, this is not harmful, something that you've done that is a crime. It's already a crime to do online all the things that are criminal in the tangible world. That has long been the case. What they now want to extend is that there will be a group of bureaucrats who can comb through all of the posts that go online and determine which ones could eventually lead people to think things that they shouldn't think and therefore should be censored for. That is not what we were promised in the Charter of Rights and Freedom. Section 2B of the Charter promises us freedom of expression, and I will uphold freedom of expression. And by the way, freedom also includes the ability to lawfully opt out of the government's abuse of our money by using new tools like Bitcoin and other assets that allow us to retain our value and protect ourselves from the monetary inflation, and therefore I will reject a China-style crackdown on cryptocurrencies. To speak up against the woke cancel culture that seeks to silence the people. Our students at university should have the ability to explore all the ideas of the spectrum. They should have open debate. They should not be silenced and shut down simply because they refuse to accept the consensus imposed upon them from the top. We are a free country, we are a bottom-up nation, and everybody should have the freedom to speak.
Absolutely!
You know, this woke culture is really not about social justice. It's about dividing us, isn't it? Trudeau is always looking for new ways to divide people. He wants to divide you based on race, gender, sexuality, most recently vaccine status. By next year, he will have found a new idea on how he can turn people against each other. We know why he wants to do it, right? Because he knows that if you are fighting with your neighbor, or your co-worker is afraid of you, then everyone will turn to him and give him more power as though he's some kind of a savior to look after you, right? It's the oldest strategy in the book, divide and conquer, isn't it? Divide and conquer. That's what this is really all about. So what is the solution? To do exactly the opposite. To be a prime minister who looks upon every Canadian with a spirit of freedom and equality, regardless of race, sexuality, gender, vaccination status, or any other relevant characteristic. No more divide and conquer. Instead, unite for freedom. With you. This politics is a participation sport, not a spectator sport. You all are players. You are all on the stage. You are all actors in this performance that we call Canada. You know, I think we all learned over the last several years that if you don't take an interest in politics, politics will take an interest in you. Or put a little bit more directly, in Justin Trudeau's Canada, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. So you need to be at the table. And in this case, that means getting yourself your membership. How many of you have memberships in the party? Look at that. All you need to do is take out your phone if you're not yet a member and join. That way you can vote and help select the next leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. I have a helpful suggestion on who that might be, but either way, you need a membership to do it. I need you. I need you. The freedoms that we have. The freedom, thank you, but I need you too. I need you too. I can't do it all by myself. We need thousands of people to buy memberships and vote. And I'll tell you, it has always been the people and not the politicians who have protected our freedom throughout the ages. Think about this. Well, look at this. We got a member over here. Look at this. We got a membership. We have Karen is a member of the Conservative Party of Canada. They call it the House of Commons for a reason. And John, Charlotte, and Shannon, and Jazz, and Tracy, and other members of Parliament can tell you this. It's the House of Commons because it is the house of the common people, right? It's green in there. Why? Because the first commoners met in the fields. And it was in those fields at Runnymede that they forced King John to kneel and sign the Magna Carta, the Great Charter, right? That brought the king under the force of law. Liberty under law was brought to our tradition in the fields by the common people, by people like you. However, even though our freedom has an 800-year-long line, it is 800 years long, it is only one generation deep, right? And it is the responsibility of every single generation to pass it one to the next. It is the contract between the dead, the living, and the yet to be born to pass down that tradition. And we have the duty